All right, so here we're looking at the radio prior to installation. This customer had another Kenwood radio, but it didn't have CarPlay, so we've got a brand new Kenwood here. This Kenwood does have CarPlay, but because it's a full-size radio, so you can see measuring wise, we got about 7 inches. Most double-din radios, if they're full-size with a CD or DVD mechanism, they need to be this size. So this is how it used to be. If you decide to opt for like an app radio, however, they'll be much thinner. The app radios typically only go to about here, so it's a lot easier to mount. With a full-size chassis, you have to account for all the wiring behind it, which you can see here. So just make it really neat. Try to zip tie everything because you minimize the amount of space. You don't really have a lot of space back there, you can see. We use our factory, this is the mounting bracket that we use. The mounting bracket, a lot of guys ask you how do you mount it. So we do it by trial, but typically we leave about this much room in front. We do 1 screw, we test fit the depth, because the depth is important because this bezel right here on the front of this thing has to line up with the bezel on the radio. So the radio panel does not hold the radio in place. It's the bracket that does, right? And the bracket has screws on the bottom. Let me see if I can lift it up here. You can see the bottom where the screws go. Those are your factory screw points. It wraps around. So let's go in the back here and take a look at some of the connections. I know you guys have asked. So back here, the things that we care about the most are the RCAs. You got the rears, the fronts, and the subwoofer. So in the NSX, we don't have really rears, so we're only using the fronts and subwoofer. We're not using a lot of the fancy attachments on this because this radio has a lot of features. It's got rear cameras, it's got video outputs for, you know, entertainment systems and game systems, and we usually don't hook that up in the NSX. Here, this connection is your radio connection for the factory antenna. We got all the wiring hooked up, zip tied, nice and clean. This radio has dual USBs, so you can see the USBs here. There's one here and there's one there. So one is for usually for the app, the CarPlay, and the other might be for USB, like a thumb drive or something. In this particular car, the owner wanted extra USB, so let me get underneath here. I'll show you if I can. We ran one of the USBs underneath, so you have a USB port down there. So that's for the passenger. And then we ran the other USB port over here on the side. I don't know if you can see it, but let's see. Here it is. That's the other USB port. So we're going to run this one. This one has got the Apple Lightning cable on already, so this one goes to the CarPlay. So this radio has dual USB ports, which is kind of nice. So this is what it looks like before we install it. You can see behind this. There's a bit of space back here, but with the radio going all the way in, you're going to hit this harness, so you got to kind of be really neat on the wiring to make it all fit. So once we got this all put together and wired, test it, make sure it works. When everything works, then you can adjust the angle and the depth. And you see there's a lot of holes here to adjust depth, and there's tons of screw holes up here. So this just takes a little bit of fine tuning. The goal is to line up this bezel as close as you can to the factory panel. In this case, this is our matte carbon panel. Your goal is to get it to sit as close to flush as you can to that piece. And then once it's all installed, we'll put it back in the car and you can see how it looks. But I wanted to show you this view before we put it back in the car, because I know you guys, by the time you see it, usually it's already all finished nice and pretty. All right, with the radio back in the car, I just want to show you one quick view. So this is what it looks like. The panel's ready to be reinstalled. We got the wiring done for the switch panel here on top. This has got the NSXR shift boot. This is our matte carbon, full carbon double din panel replacement. Here you can see the radio's been back in the car, ready to go. So what we have to do to put this thing all back together is we just gotta clean up the radio, of course, and then put the bolts in at the bottom. Those are the bolts that hold the radio in place. When that's done, we put the panel back on, put the center armrest back in, and then the car should be ready to rock and roll.